Hello, welcome to my casual book channel. This is where I talk anything casual about books. Oh my god, I was about to start talking like I do on my main channel, but no, we're going to talk about books today. These are all the books that I read in May, June, and July. Since I had like really light months for reading, I'm just going to combine them all because it's not that large of a number. I really don't push myself to read a certain amount because I am so focused on the quality of my reading that the quantity to me just feels a little bit daunting, and I feel as though it takes away from the experience of the stories I'm just trying to intake. Yeah, sometimes it'll be nice if I'm like, if I set a goal for like, oh, you should read 5 books this month. It's like nice to have that accomplishing feeling, but it just is nicer to me to be like, I really enjoyed that book. I'm gonna sit with it for a couple days and not read anything else because I don't want to get book fatigue. So yeah, I read such a small amount of books May, June, and July, and sometimes I feel bad about it because I'm like, oh my god, I need to be reading it. I don't need to do anything. Okay, it's my book journey, it's my reading style, it's what I feel comfortable with. Okay, so some of the books that I read before I go in depth to all of them, maybe talking about Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney, The Only One Left by Riley Sager, Open Water by Caleb, I forgot his last name. Oh my goodness, this is horrible. I'm sorry. I Know Who You Are by Alice Feeney, The Couple Next Door by I don't remember the author's name at all. Fourth Wing. Ugh. The Wife Between Us. There are some books that I did not mention that I'm going to mention, but just kind of like a little preview for what I read. So the first book that I read, well, is it the first? This is not in chronological order. It's a story of two friends, their relationship to each other and to other people, and kind of navigating that. It's a little past coming of age because these are people in their 20s and 30s, but it does kind of encounter a lot of things that you encounter when you're coming of age. It captures the curiosity of growing up and the growing pains and questions that come with that. They're in the UK. They're not mainly in the UK. I forget where. They're in various places in Europe. I remember that. I don't remember exactly where they are. It takes place between these two friends emailing each other back and forth, kind of giving updates about their lives. They kind of have drifted, as you do when you grow older with friends, and are trying to, keep up with them. And these people are both in, I'd say, like, they're kind of dating in separate situationship type things. One of them has more of a longer term little thing with somebody. One of them has more of a, oh, I just met this person and getting to know them, kind of dating around and coming to terms with dating. But it's not a specific romance story. It's not only about love. It's also about, like I said, their relationship to each other and kind of the difficulties that faces with being a long distance as well. Just a very interesting book because Sally Rooney has this way of tapping into things that are seemingly regular, seemingly normal experiences, but has a way of making you feel so connected to them and so curious about them that it just isn't. It's incredibly comforting to read. This was such a comfort read because there's so many beautiful things about this and this beautiful little world. It also starts pre-2020. I think it ends in 2020, which is fascinating. I gave that a 3.5, and there were some moments in the book that I will say it felt a little pretentious, but also I don't know if it felt pretentious or I just simply couldn't keep up because I was not on the same level as Sally was in writing. She would be throwing out these philosophical type questions, and they'd be talking about them over email, be like, I've never thought about the blah blah blah, and I wonder about the da-na-na. And sometimes it just is like a little exhausting kind of reading, I never the whole I never thought about, and then they go on tangents about that. It's like, but that might also just be like a difference of like culture. Also culturally, I feel like because this is set in the UK, I think Sally Rooney is somebody who's from Dublin. Sometimes I wonder if it's harder for me to connect to certain things because the author just has cultural differences, versus if this was written by an American, would I be like, oh wow. Anyway, 3.5, brilliant. The Only One Left by Riley Sager. Also, my nose is like, I don't know what's going on. Does anybody ever feel like they feel like a sensation on like their body, and it's not an itch, but it's almost like you like your body's calling out like, touch me, there's something disturbing your skin right now, but there's nothing there. If you see me touching my face a little bit, it's just my issues. I need to talk to a dermatologist about it. I think the only one left by Riley Sager. This follows a caregiver. Her name is Kit McDear, who's been assigned to an alleged murderer. So Lenora Hope is a very famous alleged murderer who has a past of allegedly killing her whole entire family decades ago. This is also set in the 80s, so decades ago, I think they said like 1939. However, Lenora was never proven guilty, and the case was never solved. On top of the case never being solved, shortly after everything had happened, the murders had happened, Lenora went completely mute, as well as developed, I think it was described as multiple sclerosis. If it wasn't, there were so many similarities to multiple sclerosis, so it might as well be that in my head. As somebody who's been a caregiver who's dealt with people with multiple sclerosis, one client with multiple sclerosis, to me that felt very much like MS. She developed MS in all parts of her body, except with the exception of her left arm, which she can use to potentially type out her own story and tell us about the alleged murders and everything kind of going on in her life. This is something that I had been waiting to read for a while. I put in a hold for this on Libby and had to wait like months to finally get it. So I read this through Libby, but through like an ebook, not through the audiobook. This book is conflicting to me because I enjoyed the story. The story and the plot were something that really kept you guessing. The caregiver herself is also a sketchy there are hints in the book that her story and who she is something to be questioned, along with Lenora Hope. By the way, Lenora Hope, I kept saying, and I might have said it earlier in this video, I kept saying in my head, Leslie Knope. Because if you watch Parks and Rec, you know who Leslie Knope is. Lenora Hope, Leslie Knope. They're the same thing to me. So I caught myself being like, oh, Leslie Knope. She's a completely different person. Yeah, so you're questioning the caregiver and the alleged murderer, and you're like, who the heck do I believe? I don't even know these people. We have a cloud of suspicion over both of them. So the question that you're asking the whole time is just like, who killed who? What the heck is happening? Is Lenora a proper narrator for this? And I will say that I was enthralled in the story, but there were just some things about it that kind of bothered me. I felt like Riley Sager, he's so good at that ending. Like, he's so good at getting you right at the ending. So much so to where you're like, oh, I can't wait for, like, to me, whenever I read a Riley Sager book, I know I'm gonna be like, I did not see that one coming. Like, I know that. But it just felt a little bit too much like you were riding on the momentum of wanting to find out. I didn't really like the main character that much. There were a lot of times where I was just kind of feeling like, okay, let's just get to it. And I don't like to feel that way in a book. Let's just get to it feeling is just something that I want to prolong the end, but sometimes it just happens. So I gave this a 3-star. It's so hard, especially when you like an author, to give them a lower rating, but it just is like, if it hits you as a 2.8, that's just what's real. But for now, I'm gonna give it a 3. I Know Who You Are by Alice Feeney. I say it like that because I heard it through audio. I read the book through an audiobook through Libby, and I was just looking for a thriller, and I was like, let me just type in Alice Feeney because I know her books are always gonna do it for me. This book is about an actress who recounts how she picked up her skills of consistently having to pretend to be somebody that she's not, because it is based in her past traumas. I forgot the main character's name, but she is an actress kind of recounting her horrible, disgusting past. And the main thing that I took away from this book, I will say, is just that it was great up until the end, and the end made me want to actually throw up. Not because it was written bad, and not because I wasn't enthralled, but because it was one of those plot twists that you're like, people would Zane and sound minds should not be partaking in these types of stories. We should not be intaking this. But at the same time, like, I can't knock her because it's so creative. The story was so good. It just is, if you're like if you're somebody who just doesn't like disturbed stories, this is not going to hit you. And it didn't hit me the way it needed to. I I originally gave it a 2.8 or like 2.75 if we're going to go off the story graph rating, but I'm going to give it a 3.25. If you're like okay with like disturbed endings that will leave you a little bit like, ew, what the ew, sure. If you're not, skip this one. But it was really good storytelling, and I was very enthralled in the audiobook. It's like every time I read an Alice Sweeney book, it goes by kind of quickly, whereas other books, it takes me a little bit longer to read. Let me get back into this. Sorry about the whole setting change. There's just been some sounds that are going on in the background that I do not want you to pick up on. But the book Open Water. So, Open Water is a story of two Black British artists. One is a photographer, one is a dancer. And it is told from the perspective of the photographer. The story is not completely a romance, but there are so many themes of love in this. But it dives into topics of grief, trauma, learning how to love, and existing safely and authentically in a Black body. The whole book is, to me, just a poem of learning how to feel physically, emotionally, and mentally safe in a world that makes it hard on you based on your past experiences to feel safe. This book, oh my God. This book was exactly what I need, exactly when I needed it. The story, like I said, it's not completely a romance book, but at the same time, it is focused on the idea of desire, like the desire to simply feel secure with somebody else who you connect with. um some There are some things in the book that talk about when you're a Black person in a predominantly white school. I can't imagine what it would be like being a Black British person. It's not something I can relate to, but I would imagine it would be maybe a little bit different than being in the US. But the way that he detailed it was, we can connect over the feeling of like isolation, and him being able to express that with the person he's expressing it with was so beautiful to read. He also experienced a lot of trauma related to one specific event that pretty much rewired his brain and made him feel in like just not stable. And that to me was, it was tough. It was like really tough to read. It was tough on me as a Black person who was felt so unsafe simply just by being perceived at some points. And but at the same time, it's incredibly beautiful to know that somebody else's words can feel like you are seen and validated. Yeah, I give this a 4 star. I highly recommend. It was so beautifully written. This was a suggestion that I got from Jack Edwards, the booktuber. Thank you so much, Jack Edwards, for also even just speaking openly about Black stories, because I feel like a lot of people who do not relate to stories don't simply just like don't speak out about them and don't recommend them because they can't relate. But it's like, okay, maybe you could just witness a story. Get the heck away from me. Get the heck away from me. My cat is threatening me. I'm sorry. Okay. We have bye. The Many Lives of Mama Love. Oh my god. Okay. Oh my god. I don't know how to rate this because this is a memoir, and it's hard to be like, I really like the blah 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 at this part, but I didn't like how she told her trauma in this part. Like, this is a real person who went through real life things and then recounted them for us to consume and then rate. It's like, I don't want to rate your life. I don't want to rate your recounting of your life because it was so beautiful that it's hard to judge. This is a book that I found, I think, through like Oprah's book club list. I love going to Oprah's book club list, just a website, and just looking through books and getting recommendations through that, because Oprah's taste just never fails and she tells very real stories. And I find that her theme of what she likes is also things written through grief. And you're just going to find a real story there. So yeah, if you are looking for like book recommendations, I struggle sometimes with getting book recommendations from like friends and family because I'm like, that's your taste. And I don't know if I can relate to that. But Oprah's taste. Give me some. Laura Love Hardin. Previously in the book, she's Laura Love for most of these stories. She had been she has had many different roles in life, and she tells us about specifically a time in her life where she starts off the book committing a crime. Like, she details this fraud that she's committing with her then husband, and talks about the moments that she is committing the crime, when she goes back home to her house where the lights or water have been turned off because they can't pay the bill. And then she gets arrested, and the bulk of the book is detailing her time in prison, or in jail, then prison. So we see her struggle of being somebody who has gone from actively committing crimes to reflecting on her life and the things that she has just kind of gone through in jail and prison, and then also was detailing her struggle with her relationship. And we see how this is also a cautionary tale to really be careful of who you're letting in your life, because a lot of the crimes that she's committing, a lot of the addiction issues, also, yeah, that's another thing, is addiction is the fuel of this whole entire story, I want to say. Addiction is just rooted in so much fear and so much shame. And it really helped me have so much empathy for anybody who struggles with addiction, because this is just a real person talking about how their fears manifested into crimes, into the addiction, into finding comfort in somebody else who has those same exact fears, addictions, flaws. But yeah, this is a cautionary tale as to be careful about who you let around, because she met her second husband after going to an AA or NA meeting, and then they just both relapsed together, and then she got herself into this mess because, not because of him, but he was a large factor as to why things were not getting better. She goes to prison, she struggles with prison, and then is out on parole, struggles intensely with parole, is very real about the fact that parole and being in the system is made to break individuals. It's not for success. She talks about how life on parole is incredibly difficult because you have to one, have a job, and then two, have to check in at any point. You have to be like randomly tested for certain things. You have to randomly just show that you're doing what you can do, but at the same time you have to have a job and like be able to like leave that job at any time, and then you have to have transportation, but it's like can't have transportation without a job unless you have like a friend or a relative who's willing to help you out. You just have to have so many resources that a lot of people out of or in parole simply just do not have, and you have to work for them and really try to make it happen, which is why the rate of recidivism is so high, because the system is not very lenient to people once they are on parole. That's what I learned. That's it. Just is an amazing book. I don't want to rate this book, but if I rating this for like out of enjoyment, I give it a 4.5 because it was so great. I learned so many things. I had so much empathy. I feel as though it's rooted in a lot of grief, which I enjoy because I'm somebody who has like a lot of grief that I would like to connect with people over. That's really sad, but like truly, I feel like a lot of themes in my life have been dealt with through grief. So seeing it in other people and seeing them triumph up from it is great. Also, the way that she triumphs of this is crazy. She went from prison to meeting the Dalai Lama, and then also meeting and having lunch with Oprah. And then now she's on Oprah's book list, which is crazy. Which is crazy cool. The Couple Next Door. A kidnapping takes place while the couple is at a questionable setting. This book is based on a kidnapping, which is always really thrilling to me to read. It's like, oh shoot, we could go anywhere with this one. We could go anywhere with the story. Essentially, this couple has been going through a lot of things in their marriage. There's a lot of little stories that are intersecting that led up to this specific night that their child, I don't remember any characters' names after this. I'm sorry. But basically, this couple were having issues beforehand. There's so many characters in this that could be culprits of who kidnapped the child. You find out a couple chapters in who kidnapped the child and why. And then there's like another plot twist on top of that as to like finding out who. And you're like, oh shoot, this is miserable. This was a great book that's going to keep you on your toes if you're interested in looking for a thriller. I think this is one of those books where you could see how this idea came to somebody, and the way that it was executed was just phenomenal. I enjoyed it, ate it up. I think I gave it like a 3.5. Fourth Wing, 2-star, because what the heck was that? I don't really know what the hype is about. The hype is what carried me through the book, really. A dragon rider school where they're learning and preparing for war. And it has the world's most annoying main character. It's just a little insufferable to me. And I'm just like, how are there adults reading this? How are there adults reading this, getting something out of it? Because to me, it just feels like I would have ate this up in middle school. You give this to me when I am 13, dude. I am reading this quickly. The Mostly True Story of Tanner and Louise. So, Louise Wilt is an older woman who needs some assistance, and she hires Tanner. I don't know Tanner's last name, but both women are going through transitional times in their lives. Tanner is currently working to save up so that she can go back to college after being out due to an injury, as well as, needing money to go back to school. And then Louise Wilt is somebody that is retired, refuses to age or admit that she's struggling in any way, which, as a caregiver, I know very well. And they get into some trouble, causing them to up and leave where they are and they don't tell anybody around them. They don't tell like their families, their friends, nobody. So they're kind of just on the run, and you're trying to figure out like what the heck is going on throughout this book. If you are a very if you enjoy books that really hit explicitly on themes of feminism and that make observations on feminism and that enjoys humor that's kind of based in, if you're just like a liberal person, I highly recommend you read this. And also if you like something that's a little bit lighthearted and fun, I recommend reading this as well. It's great. I gave this a 4-star because I would read it again and I would giggle again. Okay, the most recent book that I read was The Wife Between Us, which is a thriller. This is the story of a woman stalking her ex-husband and his fiance. Throughout the book, you get to know the woman, and you're kind of confused as to why she's stalking her ex-husband and his new girl, but then you slowly realize the reasons why. And are just kind of you're deciphering what is necessary versus what is unnecessary in this book. This to me was a very interesting book. I didn't like it that much. This was an interesting story. I think the story was great. I think the plot was great, but I don't think I liked it as much as I was supposed to. This book to me, I gave it a 2.8. Why don't I just do 2.75, dude? Can I not just do like regular quarter increments? I'm going to give this a 2.75 because I would not read this again. I was very confused at certain moments. I was like, okay, so now am I rooting for the girl or do I hate her? I understood the themes of like gaslighting, abuse, bad relationship dynamics, but I just didn't like overall how this all came together. It just to me it didn't tickle my fancy. But I did appreciate some moments in the book. I did. Okay, let's get into what I DNF'd. Because I have no problem with DNFing a book if I'm just not enjoying it. Except for The Life Between Us. Like, that to me was a book that I couldn't just DNF because I had to know what was going on till the end. I had to. So I DNF'd this book that I asked a stranger to recommend to me called The Long Road to Mercy by, his name is like, he's like one of the most, he's like a very famous author. This book has such a good story. Essentially, It's in the Atlee Pine series, and they wanted this to be the first series I ever started, but I couldn't get into it. Ooh. So Atlee Pines is somebody who works for the FBI. Her sister got taken when she was really young, and her sister was her twin. And so she's kind of like dedicated her life to being good and like solving crime. And she initially starts off the book talking to the person who took her sister just to like find out any information that she could. He's like a horrible new narcissistic abusive person. He won't give her like any hints as to like what the heck happened with her, what he did with her. And I was dedicated to that story, but because I was like, oh my god, what happened with her sister? This is really interesting. Her twin got taken, but she didn't. Like, let's see what the heck happened with her twin. Like, I want to find out what happened to her twin. Her twin is named Mercy, by the way, so that's why it's called Long Road to Mercy. But then they went on other like what felt to be other storylines that was different than her trying to find her twin. Sorry, I just had to kill a mosquito before it bit me. What I felt like it was not attached to the twin, I was like, I'm here for the twin story. So as long as we're like making clear connections to the twin story, let me know. I had a DNF because I was like, I just don't know if this is going to tie into the twin thing, if this is going to be separate about her other cases in the FBI. I don't really care about them, but yeah, I just DNF'd it. This one hurts because I really like this book and I would read it if I had it on audio, but my library does not have it in stock. So between us, how cultures define emotion, this book was great. It just essentially is this is how certain cultures define certain emotions and how socially we are acting differently based off the cultures that we're in, of course. And this woman, the psychologist who is the author of this book, details how a lot of books that are based in psychology are not specific as to defining which culture deals with what differently. Everything is kind of based on Western culture, Western, like American specific culture. So she wanted to kind of detail that out and be very specific and say, hey, this culture is more focused on blah, 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 but this culture has a focal point, blah, blah, blah. So I really appreciated that as somebody who's very multicultural, who grew up overseas and just kind of had to learn American culture as I have been here. Appreciate it very much because there's so many observations that you as an immigrant make, even if you're like an Americanized immigrant like myself. Oh my god, it just is so great to read something being documented like this book is not like a book that you want to sit down and just digest. This is kind of a book that is good in blurbs and in spurts of when you're sitting down and reading once every couple of minutes, because it deals with tweet-like formatting, because it kind of addresses tweet-like ideas. It doesn't really give you a story, it just gives you ideas to kind of soak on. So I DNF'd it because I couldn't get into it. I am currently reading Conversations with God. When I tell you, this book is changing my life currently. The author of this book is not, some sort of theologian. This author of this book kind of prefaces the book saying, I didn't go to college. I don't have any, like powerful credentials that would give me to talk about this book. I'm simply a person who was mad at God one day, wrote him a letter, asked him a bunch of questions, and then through the next couple years got my answers and wrote a book on it. And some of the questions are like things that we wonder all the time. Why do bad things happen to good people? How do I know if God is talking to me? I'm just having a blast. I'm having so much fun reading this book. It's crazy. Okay. And then Earth's the Right Place for Love. I actually have that physically with me. This is kind of right now a romance. For me, it feels like a romance. I am reminded why it's really hard for me not to read thrillers. It's really hard for me not to read thrillers or books that are not paced like thrillers, because it is so hard for me to feel invested. Oh my god. Like, this book has such beautiful writing. I tried it out on audio and I was like, because I didn't like the author. I didn't like the voice narrator, and I was like, but I knew it was gonna hit if I just kind of read it in my head voice. So I did. I gave it a try, and I think that the writing is beautiful, but it's like hard for me to feel like, okay, but like, what do I care what's gonna happen? This is just somebody living their life. And then I'm reading, or I want to read, Unsheltered by Barbara Kingsolver, that I also got from the library. It's sitting over there somewhere. And I want to also read Becoming Beyonce because because that is in my Libby right now. I just haven't sat down and watched or sat down and read because I like to have a good rotation going of thrillers. I'm like kind of over thrillers for right now, and then memoirs or autobiographies, and then I want some sort of a romance, but it has to be like a little bit of a hard hitter. It has to have a little bit of like a grief component to it. So I'm hoping that this one is going to be the one, but we'll see. Okay, that's all for my video. Hopefully, this is not like an hour long. Maybe it is though. Anyway, wherever you are, whoever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever time of day it is, I hope you have a great morning, afternoon, or night.